Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to discuss about object level lock in Java. Let's start with program on thread. For this you need to implement runnable, add unimplemented method run. In this same class you need to create a method which is lock, sys out your current thread name. Now create a synchronized block by passing this object as a parameter. Now sys out your current thread name with start and end statements. Call this created lock method in run method. Now create an object of class, that is shared object. Now initiate two threads by passing shared object as a parameter. As you can see, we have shared this object with thread 1 and thread 2. Now create one more separate object from the class. Now here we are going to create the separate thread for this separate object. Set name for all these three threads and start all the threads at end. As you can see in this diagram, there are two objects we have created, that is shared object and separate object. Shared object will be shared by thread 1 and thread 2, and the separate object will be shared with separate thread. Now we are going to debug this program by clicking right on this class file, go to debug as and select Java application. Click on this switch. As soon as this program starts, you can see here the main thread has been created. So I'm going to press F6 to execute line by line. As you can see on right hand side in variables, the shared object has been created and thread 1 and thread 2 also has been created. Now we are going to create the separate object here. Press F6, again F6. On right hand side you can see the separate object and the separate thread also has been created. Now here we are going to give a name for all these three threads. I'm pressing F6. Now let's start all these three threads and see how it executes. Thread 1 also started as thread 2 and separate thread. On left hand side you can see all the threads, that is thread 1, thread 2 and the separate thread. If you go to thread 1 and if you press the F6, as you can see the execution line is on number 8 and still it is outside of the synchronized block, so we are not able to see any key holding by those threads. As soon as you press F6 and if it goes under synchronized block, as you can see this key is owned by thread 1. This means the thread 1 is holding shared object key. Currently this execution is going under thread 1, and meanwhile if you give a chance to thread 2 and press F6, let's thread 2 go for synchronized block. As soon as it tries to go inside synchronized block, as you can see it is showing stepping because thread 2 does not have any key to operate on the shared object. And if you go back to our thread 1 execution and you press F6, it will be resumed without any problem because thread 1 has the key to operate on shared object. Here you can see the execution of thread 1 has completed. Now you can see the key has been owned by thread 2 to execute its statements. If you press F6, it will resume its execution. Thread 2 also has been completed its execution, as you can see in console. Now in this attempt of running application, this execution has started by thread 1 by holding key first. And if in second running attempt thread 2 comes to hold the key first, thread 1 will be in stepping position. This is only happening because of the shared object, and this object has been shared with thread 1 and thread 2. But what about the separate object shared by the separate thread? So the answer is thread 1 and thread 2 will not impact on the execution cycle of separate thread with separate object. Let's see the execution further by pressing F6. Now if you select the object level lock at line number 4 for the separate thread and F6, the separate thread will start its own execution and it will execute without any issue. Now you can see in console entire execution. Here in console you can see thread 1 and thread 2 initiated first, and as soon as thread 1 got the lock or the key, you can say, for the object, thread 1 has completed its execution. Then thread 2 got its chance to execute its own execution, and as we discussed, the separate thread with the separate object can execute any time in middle of all this thread 1 and thread 2 execution cycle. To check the separate thread will execute at any time, let's start debugging again by right clicking on the same class, go to debug as and select Java application. Now if you press F6, the main method will be executing. Here thread 1 started as thread 2 and separate thread also has started. In this execution, let's give a chance for thread 2 and press F6. So the thread 2 got the key to execute. As we are in the middle of thread 2 execution, check separate thread also can be executed or not. So select object level lock run and press F6. Here you can see the separate thread also started its execution without any issue. But if you select thread 1 to go for an execution, press F6, you will find stepping status for thread 1. Press F6 to complete the execution. That's it for this video. In next session we are going to discuss about class level lock, and comment down below if you want me to cover anything else. If you understood this concept, please subscribe my channel. If you like this video, hit the like button and share it with your friends.